Hello, this presentation was done for the English Language Arts team, grades 6 through 8 at Sandtown Middle School. I am LJackson, the Kennesaw State University Instructional Specialist. The purpose of this presentation is to identify and examine the Georgia Milestone ELA data from years 2016 to 2017. I'm going to analyze and compare 3 years of longitudinal data, student demographics, and its correlation with the ELA data. I'm going to identify ELA strengths and weaknesses. I will also be making suggestions and action steps to improve ELA's test scores. Our first set of data is the CCRPI single score. It compares Sandtown Middle School with Fulton County's CCRPI scores and Georgia. The state of Georgia's CCRPI score has remained constant except for a slight decrease in 2016. Fulton County's CCRPI scores have remained constant except for 2017. If you notice, Fulton County schools in 2015 was at 74.7, 74.7 in 2016, and 78 in 2017. Sandtown's current CCRPI score is 59.4. That is a decrease from 64.9 in 2016 and up from 56.9 in 2015. This next slide shows the number of ELA students tested by year at Sandtown Middle School. And we'll start with 2014-15 school year. We had 1,168 students who were tested in ELA. In 2015-2016, that number decreased to 920. Then we moved to English Language Arts in 2016-2017, and it decreased again to 824. This slide digs even deeper into our data, into the demographics at Sandtown. We have a total of 969 students during the 2016-2017 school year. The majority of our students are African American with 97%. 2% of our students are white and 1% are multiracial. If we look even deeper than that, 80% of our students are on free and reduced lunch or breakfast, free and reduced meals. That's a large percentage. And we also have 19% of these students who are students with disabilities. We have a small, limited English proficiency with only 1%. During the 2016-2017 school year, our attendance is as follows. 63% of our students have 5 or fewer days absent. 30% of our students have 6 to 15 days absent. And 7% have more than 15 days absent. And that is out of 969 students. If we look even deeper into the demographics of the absences by subgroup, we start with 969 students. And in our first group of 5 or fewer days absent, our largest group is the not economically disadvantaged group, and that's 70.5%. As we move along to more than 15 days absent, this subgroup changes to students with disabilities, and that's 16.1%. They are the majority of our students that have more than 15 days absent. If we look even deeper, the next group that's highest are our male students at 9%. And underneath that, we have our economically disadvantaged students with 8.7%. If we go back and look at the next group of 6 to 15 days absent, our highest group in this is a tie between our economically disadvantaged and our students with disabilities, both at 32.9%. So let's look a little deeper into the ELA 2014-2015 Georgia Milestones end of grade. Our largest group here are our developing learners. and that's 40.9%. And this is out of 1,168 students, and this is when our population was highest out of our 3 years. So once again, we've got our developing learners at 40.9%. Next, we have beginning learners at 29.8%, proficient learners at 27.1%, and our lowest group at 2.1%, which are our distinguished learners. As we look at the 2015-2016 Sandtown ELA Georgia Milestone End of Grade, we notice that the proficient and developing learners are pretty much at the same mark. So our developing learners are at 36.7%, while our proficient learners are at 36.1%. That's only a 6.6% difference. So that's pretty close. So it seems as if it's gone up from last year. So our beginning learners are at 23.4%, and our distinguished learners are at 3.8%. For 2016-2017 Sandtown ELA end of course Georgia milestones, we have 824 students tested. Now, our developing learners are at 41.3%, and our proficient and beginning learners are at the same mark, 27.3%. Our distinguished learners are at 4.1%. Now, as we compare the 2017 ELA data from the Georgia milestones to others, to the Fulton County schools and Georgia, we'll see exactly where Sandtown stands against them. So if you notice, we have Sandtown for 2017 has a low amount of students that are distinguished as compared to Fulton County and Georgia. And if we look at proficient learners, we are still in a small percentage as compared to Fulton County and Georgia. Our largest percentage are our developing learners, which is a much larger percentage than the rest of Fulton County and Georgia. And our beginning students are larger than Fulton County and about the same for the whole state of Georgia. As we break down the 2016-2017 ELA performance by gender at Sandtown Middle School, first of all, there were a total of 824 students tested. 372 of those students were male students, and 452 were female students. So, as we get into the data, our beginning learners that were male beginning learners were 36.3%. while our beginning learners for females were at 19.9%, almost 20%. Our developing learners, our males were at 39.2%, while our female learners were at 42.9%. Our proficient learners, our females have the larger percentage here at 32.1%, and our proficient learner males were at 21.5%. Distinguished learners, our female students were at 5.1%, while our distinguished learner male students were only at 3%. Okay, as we drill down further into the 2016-2017 data, we're going to compare ELA students with disabilities to the EL students without disabilities. So let's start with the EL students with disabilities. There were only 95 students tested. And there's a large area here that are beginning learners at 69%. Now let's compare that with the ELL students without disabilities. The beginning learners for students without disabilities were at 22%. So let's go back and look at the students with disabilities and developing learners. We have 27% of those students that were developing learners as compared to the students without disabilities at 43%. The proficient learners with students with disabilities were at 4% and the students without disabilities were at 30%. There were no distinguished learners in the students with disabilities. But on the other hand, the students without disabilities, there were 5% distinguished learners. As we drill down further into our data for 2016-2017, the ELA economic status at Sandtown Middle School, we're looking at the economically disadvantaged students compared to the not economically disadvantaged. So we have a high population of economically disadvantaged students with 540 students that were tested. The ELA students not economically disadvantaged were 284 students tested. So let's do a little bit of comparison with those two. So for our beginning learners, we've got 32% economically disadvantaged as compared to 19% beginning learners for students that aren't economically disadvantaged. Then we look at 44% of our developing learners who were economically disadvantaged compared to 37% of our students who are developing that are not economically disadvantaged. So then let's look at the proficient learners. Economically disadvantaged students were at 21% as opposed to 39% for economically not disadvantaged. And that's proficient learners. And let's look at our last group, which are distinguished learners. They're 3% in the economically disadvantaged as opposed to 5% in the distinguished learners in the that are not economically disadvantaged. After reviewing all of our data, let's look at our areas of strength. Our female students in grades 6 through 8 have the highest 2016-2017 ELA performance. We have 5.1% distinguished learners, 32.1% proficient learners, 42.9% developing learners, and 19.9% beginning learners. This coincides with our attendance data. Our female students have a low percentage of more than 15 days absent with 5.5%. They have the best attendance at Sandtown for the 2016-2017 school year. We have opportunities for improvement. According to our 2016-2017 Georgia Milestone results, our ELA students that are economically disadvantaged and our students with disabilities have the lowest rates of proficiency, and that's at 32% of our economically disadvantaged students are beginning learners, 69% students with disabilities are beginning learners, 44% economically disadvantaged students are developing learners, 27% students with disabilities are developing learners, 21% economically disadvantaged students are developing learners, while 27% of our students with disabilities are developing learners. 21% economically disadvantaged students are proficient learners, while 4% students with disabilities are proficient learners. And our last group of distinguished learners, we don't have any students with disabilities, while we have 3% economically disadvantaged students. We have questions to consider to help improve our English language arts students. 80% of Sandtown Middle School students' population is on free and reduced lunch. What type of strategies and/or resources do we have for these students? Our next question to ponder: 19% of Sandtown Middle School students are students with disabilities. What kind of strategies and resources do we have to implement to assist these students? And our last question to ponder: how do we improve our attendance for our students with disabilities? What is the cause of their absenteeism? They have the largest absenteeism with more than 15 days at 16.1%. Our action items are we need for the English Language Arts Department. We need additional differentiation for our students with disabilities and our economically disadvantaged students. We also need small ELA groups for our students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged students. And our ELA department needs to make sure that we have pre-assessments, mid-assessments, and post-assessments to monitor student learning. We also might need to implement Georgia Milestone Prep classes on Saturday. And across the board, I think we need to have incentives for student attendance for everyone. When you're in school, you are learning. Thank you very much.